My name is Art Genzler. I live here in Casper, Wyoming right now, and veteran of the Vietnam War, 1967 and 1968. I arrived there in March of 67 and rotated home in 1968. I served with the Marine Corps, particularly the 5th Marine Regiment in the northern I Corps area, and spent most of my time with India Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment, and in a rocket squad, 3.5-inch rocket team, and then also as a rifleman. So that's kind of the background there.
All right, so could you describe maybe to people who might not know what a rocket team, what that would be involved, sir?
Well, in the Army they would call it a bazooka, and the bazookas were 2.75 inches in diameter. The Marine Corps called it a rocket, and it was 3.5 inches in diameter. Typically they didn't call it, they would just say 3.5s or rockets or something like that, meaning the same thing. So it was shoulder carried and fired along one single round at a time, and it was particularly used for spotting and for high explosive out to about 11 or 1200 yards. So it was almost a handheld artillery type of weapon. Shoulder fired.
Shoulder fired. Packs a punch.
Mm-hmm. That's been replaced and was replaced in September of 1968 with the LAWS, the light anti-armor weapon. And for some reason the Marine Corps decided to catch up to the Army, and they took away the 3.5 rockets and put them in cold storage for a while and issued everybody a law.
Was that a lot lighter or heavier with your load?
No, they were much lighter. They're small in diameter and they're short. You have to expand them to fire. And I can't tell you too many particulars about them, but there were almost every rifleman then would carry a law. So you did have a little more firepower. But
that's how we did it. Every rifleman carried a law on their back too.
Did they?
Yeah. They still use them.
Yeah.
So I don't think we caught. Where are you from, sir?
Originally from North Dakota. I enlisted in the Marine Corps in North Dakota, and have lived in Wyoming now for 42 years, and lived and worked here, raised my family here.
And how do you feel personally and as a whole? How do you feel about the state-sponsored event that they put on for you guys?
Oh, I think this is a tremendous thing. I really do. I think other states should follow suit. You know, I think they're trying to honor the veterans, and the perception of what the public has hopefully will change with a little bit of that. I also think that it was a very personal thing. When we returned, there were no parades and there was no big hoopla. There was no debriefing time. When we got back to the States, we were run through a process of checking your baggage basically, and giving you time to buy a plane ticket home, and that was it. So
I know a lot there was a couple people so far that said they experienced maybe some of the protests or something when they arrived home. Is that something that you went through yourself, sir?
To a minor degree. I think when we left, we returned to El Toro Marine Air Base in El Toro, California, and Continental jets from Okinawa through to El Toro. And after we got through the checkout procedure, we were leaving the base, and at the front gate there were a bunch of people standing out there with signs, that protesting the Vietnam War. We got to the airport in LA, and we had been told by one of the liaison folks after we returned, or when we got to El Toro, to not travel alone. So there was a fellow that I had served with in India Company, and then he had a friend from Charlie Company 3, Charlie Company 19 on the DMZ, and the three of us got a cab and paid for it and took it to the LA International Airport to catch our flights out. And in the airport there were people there, and they were kind of ragged looking people, and they were flipping us the bird and things like that, but there was never anything physical or in the face type of things, and we just kind of brushed it off. At that point in time, it was over for us. We were on our way home. And of course, from there, I flew to Denver and then on into North Dakota. And the closer I got, the farther away from LA I got, the friendlier the people got. Let's put it that way. So.
And do you have maybe a couple stories that are something that sticks out to you about your time in particular, sir?
Oh gosh, we had a busy operational season during the summer of 1967. We started our operating season in May and went on to Union 2, Operation Adair, Operation Cochise. I think Union and Union 2 were a lot of heavy contact operations. We took some casualties, but we also accomplished the task that we were set out to do. September, we had an operation called Operation Swift, and it was a sudden operation. They had found a lot of enemy movement in the territory we were in, which was the Quezon Valley and Central I-Corps area, a very rich rice-raising area, rice-growing area, very fertile. And Swift caught us, I think, a little unprepared, and we took a lot of casualties in that. About 60% casualties, so it was a tough operation. And then into the fall, we had some other operations, and culminating for me in the Way City operation in February of 1968, and then 6 weeks later, I rotated home. So
that's a real quick time to go through all that, come back home without debriefing.
Mm-hmm.
Man. Is there any other stories that you'd like to share with us, sir?
Oh, you could go into details for hours and hours and hours, and there's been a book published that I've got and I've read, and it's about the operations in the Quezon area in the summer of 1967 through the summer and fall months, and it's a very good book. It was written by a colonel, retired colonel in the Marine Corps, and it gives a lot of details that, of course, you don't know at the time. You're not too concerned about the politics back home, and you're not too concerned about what is happening in Da Nang or Saigon, because your primary focus is what's around the bush and over the next hill in front of you. You share those times 24/7 with your squad members and team members, and you become very close, as you probably know, and closer than you would ever be with a family, I think, a family member. And they've got your back and you've got their back, and you develop a bond that is very tight. You also have to develop, I think, a little bit of a shell to pull around you when things get too emotional, and it can be difficult to continue on. But I think as time goes on and as your experience grows in the field, you develop that.
I know a lot of people talk about, the brotherhood that you get there. Could you explain, maybe coming from Wyoming, was there any sort of culture shock when you first were thrown into this group of people from all these different areas before you became that brotherhood that you ended?
No, I don't really think so. The Marine Corps operates basically in a small group type of atmosphere, and you become very close to the people in your group, whether it's a squad or a fire team or a company. Platoon was about as big as it got for us. Through basic training, there were other guys that you meet, and they're from all over the country, of course, and you can develop a friendship with them, but you seem closer to the guys that are from your general area. And, the rural guys seem to be a little tighter with the other rural guys. But I think you have to be adaptable enough, and you have to move in and not try to take over everything, and listen to people and learn from those people, and gain your own respect. You have to establish yourself with any group of people that you join. And I don't remember any negative effects from anything like that. It was a new world. It was an adventure for someone from a small town in a rural state. So, At the same time, we knew we weren't going to a picnic. It wasn't going to be Boy Scout camp. And we realized that very quickly when the wheels touched down in Da Nang.
Bet.
So,
Do you guys have any questions that you might have right now?
What was it like, like you say, when the wheels touch the ground? You're in this whole new world. What were those first few days like?
I guess my first impression that I can remember when we got off that plane was the tremendous heat and humidity. It was probably 105 degrees and hot. Our orders were being processed at the time, and what we ended up doing, a group of us ended up filling sandbags to build sandbag bunkers and walls around the processing area there near the Da Nang airfield. That evening, probably about 6 o'clock, we were called, our names were called, and we were put on a C-130 and flown to an airstrip in Chu Lai, which was farther south of Da Nang. And the impression there, everything was quiet. There was an NCO there that said, okay, bring your sea bags in. There's your bunks for the night. We'll get you out of here in the morning. And we had a little bit, I think we had some sea rations to eat. And then the next day we got on a truck and joined the regimental group over at Hill 69. So it, I guess the first impression was it was all military. There was nothing but green. It was a green machine. And there were people doing a little bit of everything. Everybody was active. Nobody was sitting down. Nobody was sitting around. And everybody was very decent. They were polite, helpful. But I think the first impression was the heat and humidity.
I guess this is just something that I was thinking of what you're saying that for us, I know a lot of people were saying that it was like Vietnam when we were going through there, because you'd see the farmers a day, when they waved to you and stuff, and at night they would, they would be planning all these things and planting bombs or whatever they were doing. How do you have to work around something like that? When you know that you can see these things going on, but you can't do anything right then and there about it, but you know what's happening.
Well, of course you don't trust anybody, whether it's a man or a woman or a child. You can't trust those people. And what you're saying is a lot of them were fighters by day and farmers by day and fighters by night. And I think that was true, except there were very, very few military-age males around. There were a lot of old men working the fields and living in the villages, but you seldom saw a male from 16 to 40. They were either in the South Vietnamese Army or they were recruited by the Viet Cong. So you didn't see many of those people. And I don't think you could trust the villagers to be honest and upfront with you. So consequently we didn't. But we had interpreters with us, and they would often quiz the village people, and they were, of course, natives of the area and the country, so they knew what to process and what not to process.
I know, I guess going back, when your interpreters would go through these villages, something that they like for us, they had to hide their face and stuff. Did they do any sort of that stuff, or
no?
Were they just
no.
proud to?
They were open about it. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. In fact, they were. I felt that they were far harder on the Vietnamese people, the locals, than we were.
Why would you say that?
Well, I think they could read whether they were lying to them or not. They may have known more because they would talk to everybody at different villages, and they may get contradiction from village to village or person to person. So they could be pretty rough when they were doing their doing their interviews and talking to the people in the villages.
Did you what kind of relationship did you guys have with the Vietnamese that were working with you, or the populace that would be working with you?
With the South Vietnamese Army?
Yes, sir.
Well, we were on 2 or 3 operations with the South Vietnamese Army, and we stayed pretty separate from them. and they appeared to want to step back and let us take the lead at all times. They were well supplied, but I think they were more inclined, if things got a little bit rough, to hold back. They had some elite units, but I can't say that I ever served with one of them.
All right. Is there anything else you might want to state, sir?
No, I don't think so. That's kind of a synopsis. There's a lot of details that, never seem to go away.
Yeah. I guess on that note, is there maybe something that coming back might have been hard at first, or to just being back in the United States and coming back in that process?
Oh, definitely. I remember when our plane lifted off the airfield at Da Nang, I looked out the window and looked back at that country, and of course Da Nang is right on the coastline, so the plane banked out over the sea to avoid any enemy fire that may have come from the hills around the city, and I looked out that window and thought, what has happened to me in the last year of my life? So there was a little touch of emotion there, yeah. A little hesitancy on my part about what had happened, what I had done. When I got home, it was different because a lot of people, I don't think, even realized that you'd been gone. They'd say, well, I haven't seen you for a long time. Where have you been? Things like that. So the war wasn't a focus at that time. The anti-war protest became a focus sometime after that, I think. But emotionally, it was an adjustment of trying to get back into some kind of a normal life and integrate back into this civilized world and civilization. And I don't think I had an appreciation for sleeping in a real bed with clean sheets and eating at a table with silverware and plates. Shower every day. I don't think I had an appreciation for that until I did get home from Vietnam, and after that I still think about it today.
That's one thing I told